Welcome back to Things You Don't Know. I'm Chandler Foster, your resident curious civilian, and with me, as always, are Dr. Sean Deneen, historian of ideas, and Dr. William Weaver, cognitive scientist and all-around mythbuster.
Hello again, everyone.
Glad to be here and glad my own biorhythm chart says this is a good day to record, which, spoiler alert, is nonsense.
Well, see, that's our topic for today, biorhythms. Those colorful charts that supposedly tell you when you'll be smart, clumsy, moody, or accident prone based on your date of birth. Today, we are going to give a short history of biorhythm theory, explain what the theory actually claims, the math, the cycles, and the critical days. We're going to dive into the scientific tests and why the positive results fell apart under better statistics. Then pivot to real biological rhythms, circadian, ultradian, and infradian, how they actually infect performance, vigilance, and emotion. So, what are biorhythms anyway? Okay, Dr. Weaver, why don't we start with the basics? When people say biorhythms, what exactly are they talking about?
In the popular sense, biorhythms are a pseudo-scientific theory that says your life is governed by three fixed sinusoidal cycles that start at birth and run forever. A 23-day physical cycle, supposedly controlling strength, coordination, and physical well-being. A 28-day emotional cycle, mood, sensitivity, and creativity is covered there. And a 33-day intellectual cycle, memory, logic, and analytical powers are covered there. On any given day, you're at a high point or a low point on each wave. Combine them, and you get a chart that claims to predict your good days, bad days, and critical days. When the wave crosses zero, and you're supposedly more vulnerable to mistakes or accidents.
And these cycles are supposed to be mathematically exact, right? Like 23 days exactly? Forever?
Exactly. And that's a key red flag. In real biology, rhythms drift. They respond to light, hormones, and social cues. They're messy. A biorhythm theory insists on perfect 23, 28, 33-day sine waves that never change and supposedly apply to everyone. That precision is part of what makes it attractive and scientifically suspicious.
So, where did this all come from? Who woke up one day and said, "You are now a 23-day wave"?
Okay, the story starts in the late 19th century with William Fleiss, a Berlin physician and friend of Sigmund Freud. Now, Fleiss thought he saw regular 23 and 28-day patterns in birth, illnesses, and other events. He called them male and female cycles, tying the 28 rhythm loosely to the menstrual cycle. Now, just to be clear here, Freud disavowed any belief in the biorhythm thing. Okay, so in the early 1900s, Hermann Schwabata, a Viennese psychologist, also argued that life events followed these 23, 28-day cycles. And of course, there's Alfred Telscher, an engineer in Innsbruck, who studied his students and claimed their mental performance rose and fell in a 33-day pattern. So we end up with the three classic cycles 23, 28, 33 days.
And then we fast forward to the 1970s, right? That's the golden age of self-help fads.
Exactly. In the 1970s, biorhythms exploded in popular culture. There were paperback books like Biorhythm, A Personal Science, arcade style biorhythm machines that printed your chart if you put in a coin and your birth date. Early personal computer programs and even dedicated calculators like the Casio Biolator. The pitch was seductive. Feed in your birth date and get a day by day forecast of your physical, emotional, and intellectual ups and downs. People used it for sports betting, scheduling surgery, planning test dates, and even matching romantic partners.
So it's like a scientific looking horoscope. Math symbols instead of zodiac signs, huh?
Yeah, Chandler, that's a very good analogy. It looks mathematical, which gives it a veneer of science, but that doesn't make it true.
Well, let's get into the guts of it. If I go to a biorhythm website and plug in my birthday, what is it actually calculating?
Well, under the hood, it's just three sine waves. The number of days since your birth is calculated and divided into three biorhythms: the physical, the emotional, the intellectual. And values near +1 on the chart are supposed to be peak days. Near -1 are low days. When the curve crosses zero, that is called a critical day. The theory claims you're more error prone then.
And people claimed you could predict, for example, accidents from those critical days.
Yes, advocates argued that if you look at, say, traffic accidents or workplace injuries, you'll find they cluster on those predicted critical days. They also claimed that students test better when their intellectual cycle is high. Athletes perform better when their physical cycle is high. Mood disorders or suicide spike when the emotional cycle is low. Sounds pretty testable, right?
It sure does. Science says don't take the driving test on this date. So did that hold up?
you know, Scientists did take this seriously enough to test the theory. One classic study by John Schaefer and colleagues in 1978 looked at 2005 carefully investigated highway crashes where the driver was clearly at fault: 135 fatal and 70 non fatal. They calculated each driver's position on all three biorhythm cycles at the time of the crash and asked, are crashes more frequent on those so called critical days than chance would predict? The answer: no, 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 no. The crash dates looked exactly like you'd expect from random chance with no excess risk on critical days.
So the flagship prediction that critical days mean more crashes fails.
Right. And it wasn't just that one study. Other researchers analyzed motor vehicle fatalities, general aviation accidents, and industrial accidents in factories. Again and again, they didn't find meaningful correlations between biorhythm phases and accidents.
Well, what about the intellectual and emotional cycles? Did anyone find that students actually do better when their intellectual wave is high?
That has been tested too. Several studies looked at things like reading scores and test performance across different positions on the intellectual cycle, self reported mood across the emotional cycle. A comprehensive review by Terrence Hines, covering dozens of studies, concluded that if you do the stats correctly, biorhythms do not predict academic performance or mood any better than random guessing. In the rare papers that claimed a positive effect, the results were due to statistical and methodological errors, not real predictive power.
So, in other words, when biorhythms work, it's usually because the math was poorly done. I guess they got me to do the math. So, the scientific verdict is basically no signal, all noise.
Exactly. The consensus in mainstream science is that biorhythm theory is not valid, and it's classified as a form of pseudoscience.
Why don't we talk about those errors? You want to?
Yeah.
All right. How in the world did people manage to convince themselves that this worked?
Well, there are a few classic problems which just really made it look good. One is called the Texas sharpshooter fallacy.
Why don't you explain that to us?
Okay. Imagine that a guy shoots bullets at a barn at random. Then he walks up afterwards, draws a circle around the tightest cluster of bullet holes, and proudly announces, "Look how accurate I am." That's biorhythm research a lot of the time. You look at a pile of accidents or events, then you search for any pattern with your cycles. You highlight the hits where something did happen near a critical day, and you quietly ignore all the misses where nothing happened. The pattern is being found after the fact, not predicted before the data. That's not how proper testing works.
So they were basically drawing the target after the shots.
Exactly. Okay, so there's another fallacy: multiple comparisons and flexible dates. Okay, what does that mean? If I say we'll test physical, emotional, and intellectual cycles, and we'll do it on positive phases, negative phases, and critical days against 10 different outcomes: accidents, test scores, surgery, sales, etc., etc. Suddenly, you get dozens of possible correlations. Even if there's no real effect, pure chance will make a few look statistically significant. If you then only publish the exciting few that worked and quietly ignore all the others that didn't, you create the illusion of a powerful theory from what is basically random noise. Another issue was poor controls and cherry picked samples. What do I mean? First, using very small groups of people, not controlling for obvious confounds like time of day, fatigue, weather, or alcohol, choosing people or events that already look unusual, like accident prone drivers, star athletes, etc. When better designed studies came along, like Schaefer's 205 crash cases with careful fault assignment and proper statistical comparison, the effects just disappeared.
So, biorhythms weren't just wrong, they were a perfect storm. Bad statistics plus human pattern seeking, right?
Yeah. People love patterns, especially ones that promise control. Don't fly today. It's a critical day, even when the data says there is no such pattern.
So now that we've dismantled the pseudoscience, let's pivot here a minute. The word itself, biorhythm, sounds like it ought to be real. Are there authentic biological rhythms that do influence behavior and performance?
Absolutely. That's the important nuance. Biorhythm charts are bunk, but biological rhythms are very real and scientifically well established. Chronobiology, the science of biological time, studies things like circadian rhythms, which are about 24 hours long, ultradian rhythms, which are shorter than 24 hours, and infradian rhythms, which are longer than 24 hours. These do influence cognitive performance, vigilance, and emotion. Let's walk through some of those.
Well, let's start with circadian rhythms. I hear those everywhere. Phones have circadian night mode now.
Yeah, a circadian rhythm is a roughly 24-hour cycle in your body. Circa diem means about a day. That's Latin. Your main circadian pacemaker sits in the brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus, and that's a tiny cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus that respond to light and help coordinate such things as sleep wake cycles, core body temperature, hormone release like melatonin, hunger, and metabolic rhythms. So, left in constant dim light, humans still show a rhythm close to, but not exactly 24 hours. which shows it's generated internally. Then it's adjusted by light.
So, what does that mean for cognition and vigilance?
Well, it means a lot. Studies on shift workers, nurses, and industrial workers show that when your circadian rhythm is misaligned, for example, you're working nights, but your body still expects to be asleep, several things happen. Your sustained attention drops. People get slower and less accurate on vigilance tasks like the psychomotor vigilance test. Your reaction times get slower. Working memory and decision making degrade. Sleepiness and microsleeps increase, especially during the circadian low in the early morning hours. Meta-analysis find that chronic shift workers with circadian disruption show measurable cognitive impairments and increased risk of errors and accidents compared to day workers. So, unlike biorhythm charts, circadian phase really does matter for performance.
So that feeling of being useless at 3 a.m. is not a character flaw. It's bad biology.
Exactly. Your brain is literally operating at a different baseline depending on where you are in the circadian cycle.
What about mood and emotion?
Well, circadian disruption is linked to irritability and mood swings, higher rates of depression and anxiety, like in chronic shift workers, strong day night patterns in some psychiatric symptoms. We're also learning that the timing of light exposure, meals, and social interaction can modulate mood. Think of jet lag or how winter darkness can contribute to low mood. So, if you want a real scientifically grounded biorhythm, circadian timing is it.
Okay, next level down. Ultradian rhythms. Now, what are those? What are those?
Yeah, ultradian rhythms are cycles shorter than 24 hours. So they repeat multiple times in a day.
So, our brains naturally work in 90 minute focus blocks?
Roughly, yes. The evidence isn't as clean as for circadian rhythms, but we do see repeating cycles in EEG, that's electroencephalogram patterns, autonomic nervous system activity, and subjective awareness. In practical terms, many people focus best in 60 to 90-minute bursts of deep work, then benefit from a 10 to 20-minute break. That's your ultradian rhythm at work. The brain uses alternating bursts of high resource use and recovery to maintain performance over the day.
So instead of checking a biorhythm app, I should just respect my 90-minute power block and then take a walk.
Honestly, yeah. That will do more for your performance than any colored chart based on your birth date. That's for sure.
The last category is infradian rhythms.
Infradian rhythms are cycles longer than 24 hours. They're weekly, monthly, yearly, and so on. In humans, classic examples include the menstrual cycle, typically around 28 days, seasonal rhythms, things that change over the course of the year, like mood or energy with changing light levels.
Let's talk about the menstrual cycle for a minute, because that's one place people often think in so called emotional cycles.
The menstrual cycle is a real infradian rhythm driven by changes in hormones like estrogen and progesterone. Many people experience fluctuations in mood, changes in energy and sleep, sometimes shifts in cognitive performance, though these are typically modest and vary widely between individuals. So, yes, there are legitimate, longer term biological cycles that affect how we feel and perhaps how we perform, but they're not the simplistic, universal 28-day emotional wave of biorhythm charts. They're governed by complex hormone dynamics and are different from person to person.
Well, we all know that females have cycles. Now, do males have cycles too? I have a feeling they do.
Yeah. Men absolutely have biological cycles, but they're not the same as a female menstrual cycle, and they work on somewhat different time scales. In men, the best studied cycles are daily, that circadian hormone cycles. Testosterone in males shows a strong 24-hour rhythm, peaks in the early morning, often around waking time, gradually declines through the day, and is lowest in the evening. Uh, Many studies have shown late night rebound of testosterone levels too. This daily curve is linked to sleep, light exposure, and overall health. Poor sleep and shift work can blunt this rhythm.
So you are saying that men have cycles. I never noticed anything directly like that in myself. I wonder why.
Men's cycles are shorter and they respond more to stress and arousal systems. Hormones like cortisol, the stress hormone, and adrenaline fluctuate through the day in response to stressors, meals, exercise, and social interaction. These aren't the neat 28-day cycles. They're more like dynamic waves responding to what's happening in your life. So men don't have like a male period, but they do have recurring patterns in hormones, energy, libido, sleepiness, and mood, just more day to day and context driven than a fixed monthly cycle.
So, how do the female cycles differ and compare with the male cycles?
Well, in men, daily testosterone and sleep related rhythms can influence energy, motivation, irritability, and libido, as I said. But the pattern is mostly day by day and can be heavily shaped by habits like sleep, alcohol, stress. In women, the menstrual rhythm can overlay daily circadian rhythms, creating phase related patterns in mood, pain sensitivity, fatigue, and sometimes cognition, but with big individual differences.
And seasonal stuff? Is winter blues really a rhythm?
In many cases, yes. Seasonal affective disorder, sometimes referred to as SAD, is strongly tied to the annual light dark cycle. Shorter days in winter mean less light exposure, which affects melatonin and circadian timing and can trigger depressive symptoms in susceptible people. That's a kind of circadian rhythm and infradian rhythm with a period of about 1 year. So, again, real biology, real impact, not the fly style numerology of everyone's emotions follow a perfect 28-day wave.
Now, let's connect this back to real life. Suppose I'm listening to this on my commute. What should I actually do with this knowledge about circadian, ultradian, and infradian rhythms?
Great question. Here are some practical takeaways. First, work with your circadian rhythms. Most people have times in the day when they're naturally like sharper and more awake, often mid morning or late afternoon. And they have times when they hit a slump, like the early afternoon, late night. Whenever possible, try to schedule analytical or demanding tasks like writing, complex problem solving, etc., during your personal peak hours. Put routine or low stakes tasks during your slower times. If you're a shift worker, be aware that chronic circadian misalignment can erode vigilance and cognitive performance, and advocate for schedules that allow enough sleep and light exposure. Also, use ultradian cycles to your advantage. Work in 60 to 90-minute focus blocks, then take 10 to 20-minute breaks. Walk, stretch, hydrate, stare out a window even. This respects your ultradian rhythm, letting your brain recover rather than trying to brute force 4 hours of nonstop concentration. Also, respect your infradian rhythms. If you have a menstrual cycle or strong seasonal mood shifts, track how your energy and emotions change over days and weeks. Notice if certain phases reliably bring lower mood, more fatigue, or lower patience. Where you can, Avoid stacking high stakes demands on in your most vulnerable windows, and talk with healthcare professionals if cycles are severely affecting your functioning. That's not superstition. That's just good self monitoring of real biological variation.
Before we wrap, I just want to zoom back out for a minute. As a historian, I have to say, I'm fascinated by the idea that biorhythm charts hung around for decades despite negative evidence. Why?
Well, there really are several reasons. One we could call a cognitive bias. Remember the hits, i.e., wow, my chart said today was critical and I did trip on the stairs, and forget all the misses. An illusion of control. It feels very comforting to believe we can anticipate bad days and avoid them.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and then
A lot of sense.
there's also this math mystique. Sine waves, graphs, and numbers, they look scientific, even if the underlying idea is wrong. And then also real rhythms as camouflage, because real circadian and hormonal rhythms exist. It's easy for people to say, see, cycles are real, so biorhythms must be too. But the fact that some cycles are real doesn't mean every numerically tidy cycle we invent has predictive power.
It's like saying planets move in orbits, so obviously my mood follows a 13-day cosine wave that I just made up.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Real science starts with measurements, identifies irregularities, and tests predictions rigorously. Biorhythm theory started with favorite numbers, then searched for confirmation.
Well, all right, Dr. Weaver, why don't you give us the elevator pitch summary?
Oh, gosh. Okay. I wouldn't call it that exactly, but let's see. Sure. Popular biorhythm charts, the 23-day physical, 28-day emotional, 33-day intellectual cycles have been tested many times and do not predict accidents, performance, or mood beyond chance. Early positive biorhythm studies were plagued by statistical errors, cherry picked data, multiple comparisons, and the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. In contrast, real biological rhythms, circadian, ultradian, infradian, are robustly demonstrated and have clear, measurable impact on cognitive performance, vigilance, and emotion. If you want to optimize your life, respect your actual body clock rather than trusting a graph generated from your birth date.
So the story isn't just rhythms are fake, it's the simple one size fits all biorhythm formula, like so many other things, is fake. The real rhythms are more complex, but also more useful.
And for anyone feeling that 3 a.m. cognitive crash, it's not your biorhythm app, it's your circadian rhythm system yelling, "Go to bed!"
Exactly. If you want one practical rule from all this, don't outsource your decisions to a biorhythm chart. Do pay attention to when you feel most alert, creative, or steady, and structure your life to ride those waves.
That's our time for today. If you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review, preferably when your intellectual cycle is irrelevant.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions about other scientific or historical fads you'd like us to dissect, please send them in.
Until next time, take care of your real rhythms.
Well, this has been Things You Don't Know with Dr. Weaver, Dr. Deneen, and Chandler Foster. See you next episode.